December 23, 1944. 0200 hours, 500 yards west of Foy, Belgium. The frozen ground resisted every thrust of the entrenching tool, but Private First Class James Robert Callahan kept digging. Around him, the Ardennes forest lay shrouded in darkness and fresh snow, the kind of profound blackness that existed only in the countryside. Far from electric lights and cities, the 20-year-old from Oskaloosa, Iowa, had been digging foxholes since landing in Normandy 6 months earlier. But tonight, he was creating something different. Something that would, within the next 8 hours, result in the capture of 43 German soldiers without firing a single shot. A feat that would earn him the Silver Star and demonstrate that American ingenuity could defeat German military doctrine forged in Prussian academies. What the advancing German forces could not know was that they were about to encounter not sophisticated military engineering, but a farm boy's understanding of animal behavior, winter conditions, and human nature, all channeled through the simple tool that had become the most underestimated weapon in the American arsenal. The standard issue M1943 entrenching tool, a folding shovel that weighed just 2.5 pounds. 6 days earlier, on December 16th, Operation Watch on Rhine, the German Ardennes offensive, had erupted across an 85-mile front. 200,000 German troops, supported by 1,000 tanks and nearly 2,000 artillery pieces, had achieved complete tactical surprise. The 101st Airborne Division rushed to defend the critical crossroads at Bastogne, found itself surrounded by December 20th. Among the paratroopers was Private First Class Callahan, assigned to Easy Company, 2nd Battalion, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. He was not a paratrooper by choice or training. He had been a replacement, one of thousands of infantrymen fed into depleted airborne units as casualties mounted through the fall campaign. Callahan had grown up on a 160-acre farm outside Oskaloosa. His father had worked the land through the Great Depression using techniques passed down through 3 generations. Young Jim learned from age 6 how to read animal behavior, predict weather patterns, understand terrain, and, most importantly, how to solve problems with limited resources. The farm had taught him that expensive solutions were rarely necessary when simple ones would work. By December 22nd, the situation around Bastogne had become critical. German forces had completely encircled the town, cutting all roads. Supply shortages were severe. Ammunition was rationed. Food was scarce. The weather had prevented air resupply for days, and German attacks probed American defenses continuously, seeking weak points. Easy Company held a section of the perimeter northwest of Foy. The company's defensive position stretched along a tree line facing open ground that sloped gently downward toward German positions approximately 800 yards away. Between the opposing forces lay a no-man's land of snow-covered fields, scattered trees, and frozen streams. On the night of December 22nd to 23rd, intelligence reports indicated increased German patrol activity. Second Lieutenant Thomas Harrison, Easy Company's executive officer, called together his squad leaders. "Gentlemen," Harrison said, "we expect heavy German patrol activity tonight. They are probing for weak spots before launching attacks. We need prisoners for interrogation." The standard American response would have been to send out counter-patrols. But Easy Company was down to 73 effectives from its table of organization strength of 154. Every man was needed on the defensive line. Sending out patrols would weaken the perimeter and risk casualties the company could not afford. Private First Class Callahan raised his hand. "Sir," Callahan said, "back home in Iowa, we had problems with coyotes getting into the chicken coops. You couldn't stay up all night guarding chickens, and you couldn't afford to lose chickens to predators. So my dad taught me how to funnel them where you wanted them to go and make it easy for them to get trapped." The room fell silent. Several sergeants exchanged glances, but Harrison, who had grown up in rural Pennsylvania and understood farm life, asked Callahan to continue. Callahan explained his concept. German patrols, like any predators, followed patterns. They moved through the terrain using natural features for concealment. They avoided open ground where possible. They preferred routes that offered cover and concealment. Most importantly, they followed paths of least resistance, especially in difficult conditions like deep snow and darkness. The snow is deep, Callahan continued. Germans are going to follow existing paths, depressions in the ground, anywhere the snow is shallower. If we can funnel them toward one specific spot and make that spot look like good cover, they will naturally gravitate toward it. Then we make the trap. Lieutenant Harrison later wrote, "The plan sounded absurd when Callahan first proposed it. We were professional soldiers facing the Wehrmacht's best troops. The idea that we could trap them like chickens seemed ridiculous, but we had no better options, and Callahan's logic was sound. I authorized him to try." Callahan gathered 4 volunteers: Private First Class Robert Martinez from New Mexico, Private Eugene Webb from Kentucky, Private David Kowalski from Michigan, and Private First Class William Red Thompson from Oklahoma. Each had grown up in rural areas. Each understood hunting, trapping, and reading terrain. At 2100 hours on December the 22nd, the 5-man team moved forward from American lines. They carried minimal equipment: entrenching tools, white camouflage sheets made from bed linens, weapons with full ammunition loads, and gunny sacks filled with pine branches, leaves, and forest debris. The location Callahan had selected was a natural depression approximately 300 yards forward of American lines. The ground sloped gently from German positions toward this depression, which was surrounded by scattered trees providing apparent cover. A small frozen stream bed led directly toward it, creating a natural pathway. The genius of Callahan's plan lay in its exploitation of German tactical doctrine. Wehrmacht patrol procedures, perfected through years of combat, emphasized using terrain for cover and concealment. Patrol leaders were trained to read ground, identify optimal routes, and move through the landscape efficiently. But doctrine could be exploited if one understood its underlying assumptions. Callahan's team spent 3 hours preparing the trap. First, they carefully cleared snow from the streambed, creating an obvious path. The removed snow was scattered naturally, making the clearance appear to be the result of wind rather than human intervention. The path led directly toward the depression. Second, they enhanced natural cover along the route. Small pine branches were positioned to create apparent concealment at intervals. Third, they prepared the terminal point. The natural depression was approximately 6 feet deep and 8 feet across. Callahan's team enlarged it using their entrenching tools, creating a pit roughly 8 feet deep and 12 feet in diameter. Fourth, they covered the pit. Using fallen branches as a frame, they created a lattice structure across the opening. Over this, they placed a layer of pine needles, leaves, and forest debris. Finally, they dusted the entire surface with a thin layer of snow that matched the surrounding ground. The result was nearly invisible, even from close range. In darkness, it would be completely undetectable. Fifth, they positioned their observation and capture positions. Martinez and Webb took positions in trees 15 yards on either side of the trap. Kowalski positioned himself behind a fallen log 25 yards back along the approach route. Thompson took a position 30 yards beyond the trap. Callahan himself positioned in a shallow scrape 10 yards from the trap's edge, where he could observe it directly and control the capture operation. At 01:15 hours on December 23rd, Kowalski signaled with a subtle bird call. German patrol approaching. Through the darkness, Callahan could hear them before seeing them. The sound of equipment rattling softly, boots crunching through snow, hushed voices speaking German, professional sounds, experienced soldiers moving with tactical competence. The German patrol consisted of 12 men, a standard squad-sized element. They moved cautiously, but not fearfully, men who had conducted hundreds of such patrols and survived through skill and experience. The point element reached the streambed and paused. This was the critical moment. Would they recognize the cleared path as suspicious, or would they see it as a tactical advantage? After perhaps 30 seconds, the point element entered the streambed and began following it toward the trap. The cleared snow made movement easier, exactly as Callahan had predicted. The main body followed the point element into the streambed. They moved in textbook fashion, maintaining proper intervals, weapons ready. These were not green troops, but experienced soldiers who had survived against Russian and American forces through competence and caution. As they approached the depression, the point element slowed. The terrain here offered excellent cover, a natural position for observation or rest before the final approach to American lines. The lead German soldier, an Unterfeldwebel equivalent to a sergeant, gestured for his men to gather in the depression. The first German stepped onto the covered pit. For a moment, perhaps 2 heartbeats, the framework held. Then it collapsed. The German soldier dropped 8 feet straight down with a startled cry, cut short as he hit the bottom. The covering materials, snow, branches, leaves, debris, rained down on top of him. The second German, following closely behind, could not stop his momentum. He plunged into the pit before realizing what had happened. The third soldier tried to stop, but the snow-covered ground at the pit's edge was deliberately undermined. It gave way beneath him, and he tumbled in backward. In the space of 5 seconds, 3 German soldiers had fallen into the trap. The remaining 9 froze, shocked and confused. In darkness, they could not immediately understand what had happened. This moment of confusion was exactly what Callahan had planned for. He stood up from his concealment, white camouflage making him difficult to target, and called out in the German he had learned from his Iowa neighbors. Nicht schießen! Hände hoch! Don't shoot! Hands up! Simultaneously, Martinez and Webb emerged from their tree positions, weapons aimed at the disoriented Germans. Thompson appeared from behind, cutting off retreat. Kowalski moved forward, blocking the approach route. The Germans were surrounded. Their comrades were trapped in a pit they could not escape without assistance, and they faced Americans who had appeared seemingly from nowhere. The Unterfeldwebel assessed the situation instantly. His men were completely exposed. They could not effectively fight from their current positions. Retreat was cut off. Most critically, his mission was reconnaissance, not combat. Surrendering with intelligence to give was preferable to dying uselessly. Hände hoch, the German sergeant ordered his men. Hands up, we surrender. The capture took approximately 90 seconds from the first German entering the trap to the last German raising his hands. Not a shot had been fired. 9 German soldiers were prisoners. 3 more were trapped in the pit. But the night was not over. As Callahan's team was securing the prisoners, Kowalski signaled again. Another patrol approaching. This second German patrol, following 30 minutes behind the first, consisted of 10 men. Callahan faced a decision. He now had 12 prisoners in custody and 3 still in the pit. His team of 5 was outnumbered 3-1 by captives. Attempting to capture a second patrol risked losing control of the situation entirely. But Callahan had grown up managing situations where he was outnumbered. 1 farmer against hundreds of chickens, dozens of cattle, countless tasks. The key was not matching numbers, but controlling behavior. Callahan directed his team with hand signals. Within 5 minutes, the trap was reset, prisoners were silent under threat of immediate violence if they made noise, and the team was ready. The second German patrol followed exactly the same route as the first. They entered the stream bed, moved toward the depression, and gathered at the pit's edge. The lead soldier stepped onto the covering. It collapsed. He fell. The soldier behind him fell. A third German, trying to stop, slid on the snow-covered edge and tumbled in, backward. The remaining 7 Germans experienced the same moment of shock and confusion as the first patrol. Callahan executed the same procedure, rising from concealment and ordering surrender in German. The second Unterfeldwebel made the same rational calculation as the first. He surrendered his patrol without resistance. Now Callahan had 22 German prisoners in custody and 6 in the pit. His 5-man team was outnumbered more than 5-1. At 0300 hours, a third German patrol approached. This patrol was smaller, just 8 men. The trap claimed 3 more Germans. The remaining 5 surrendered when surrounded. Callahan now had 31 prisoners, plus 9 in the pit. But at 0345 hours, Kowalski signaled a 4th time. This final German patrol consisted of only 5 men. They followed the same streambed route, approached the depression, and 3 men fell into the trap before realizing what was happening. The remaining 2 surrendered immediately. Callahan now had 43 German prisoners in custody. His original plan had succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation, but he now faced the practical problem of actually getting his captives back to American lines before dawn. Callahan divided the prisoners into groups of 10, with 1 American soldier escorting each group. The journey back to American lines would take 4 trips, with each escort returning after delivering prisoners. The first group departed at 0400 hours, with Private Martinez leading 10 Germans back through the darkness. They reached American lines without incident 12 minutes later. The process continued through the dangerous pre-dawn period. By 0540 hours, all 43 German prisoners had been delivered to Easy Company's command post. The operation had succeeded without firing a single shot. Not 1 American casualty had been incurred. Not 1 German had been killed. Yet 43 enemy soldiers had been removed from the battlefield. The immediate intelligence value was significant. The prisoners came from 4 different units: the 9th SS Panzer Division Hohenstaufen, the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division, the 18th Volksgrenadier Division, and the 5th Parachute Division. This revealed that German forces opposite Bastogne were a scratch formation drawn from multiple units, indicating German commanders were having difficulty concentrating forces for decisive attacks. The prisoners' interrogation revealed planned German attacks, artillery positions, supply situations, and, most importantly, morale conditions. Several prisoners volunteered that German forces were experiencing severe fuel shortages, that promised reinforcements had not arrived, and that many soldiers believed the offensive had already failed. If you're enjoying this story of American ingenuity and resourcefulness, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We bring you the untold stories of World War II that changed history, stories of ordinary soldiers doing extraordinary things. Don't miss future episodes. Subscribe now. Lieutenant Harrison's after-action report, filed January 3, 1945, captured the significance. Private First Class Callahan's operation demonstrated the value of individual initiative and unconventional thinking. His background in farm life provided practical knowledge that proved more valuable than military training. The operation succeeded because we were willing to try an unorthodox approach rather than following standard procedures. The report concluded, "It is recommended that Private First Class Callahan be awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action." Harrison's recommendation was approved, and Callahan received the Silver Star in a ceremony conducted in early February 1945. But the story's significance extends beyond one soldier's medal. It represents a fundamental difference between military cultures that helps explain the ultimate outcome of the war. German forces entered World War II with superior training, equipment, and doctrine, yet they ultimately lost, not primarily because of Allied material superiority, though that was decisive, but because they could not adapt as effectively as their opponents. American military culture, rooted in democratic individualism and frontier pragmatism, excelled at improvisation. American soldiers were not necessarily better trained or more courageous than German soldiers, but they were more willing to try unorthodox solutions, more comfortable with improvisation, and more likely to trust individual initiative over prescribed procedures. This cultural difference manifested throughout the war. American soldiers modified weapons and equipment in field workshops, creating solutions to problems that German soldiers would have reported up the chain of command. American commanders gave subordinates broad mission-type orders and expected them to figure out execution, while German commanders often prescribed detailed methods. The shovel trap that captured 43 Germans in one night exemplified this difference. No manual prescribed this tactic. No academy taught it. No doctrine authorized it. Yet it worked because a farm boy from Iowa recognized that German soldiers, like any predators, followed patterns that could be exploited. The entrenching tool itself represented American pragmatism. The M1943 entrenching tool weighed 2.5 pounds, folded to fit in a soldier's pack, and could function as shovel, pick, or even close combat weapon. Over 5 million were produced during the war at a cost of approximately $1.50 each. The American tool's versatility reflected American design philosophy. Create one simple tool that does multiple jobs adequately. Within days, Callahan's story spread through the 101st Airborne Division. Other soldiers began thinking about how they could apply similar principles. Improvised traps, obstacles, and deception operations proliferated across the American perimeter. German prisoners interrogated after the battle mentioned repeatedly that American defenders seemed to have traps and surprises everywhere. After the battle, Army public relations officers prepared a story about the farm boy who captured 43 Germans with a shovel trap. The story was released to American newspapers in February 1945, appearing in hundreds of papers across the country. The propaganda value was significant. Callahan's story had particular resonance in rural America. He was not a professional soldier from West Point. He was a farm kid from Iowa who had applied lessons learned feeding chickens and managing livestock to capturing German soldiers. Rural Americans, who sometimes felt disconnected from high-tech warfare, could identify with Callahan's achievement. Post-war analysis of Callahan's operation identified several factors that contributed to its success. First, exploitation of enemy doctrine. German patrol procedures were predictable because they followed established doctrine. Second, appropriate use of terrain. The trap location was carefully selected to appear naturally attractive while providing advantages to American captors. Third, psychological understanding. Callahan anticipated German reactions and positioned his forces to exploit confusion. Fourth, fire discipline. By avoiding shooting, the operation remained covert. Fifth, simplicity. The trap required only basic materials. These principles were incorporated into infantry training manuals, revised after the war. The section on small unit tactics included case studies of improvised operations, with Callahan's shovel trap featured prominently. The German prisoners captured that night had varied reactions when they learned exactly how they had been trapped. One German soldier, Gefreiter Hans Müller, was interviewed in 1983. He recalled, "We were experienced soldiers. We had fought in Russia, in France, in multiple campaigns. We thought we knew all the tricks. Then we walked into a trap that a farm boy had made with a shovel. It was humiliating, but also enlightening." The Americans were not inferior soldiers. They were different soldiers, and we had underestimated what that difference meant. The operation's influence extended into Cold War military thinking. During the 1950s and 1960s, American military planners studied World War II operations that demonstrated successful unconventional tactics. Callahan's shovel trap became a case study in asymmetric warfare. Callahan himself had a relatively quiet post-war life. He returned to Iowa in late 1945, received his Silver Star in a ceremony at Fort Des Moines, and went back to farming. He married his high school sweetheart, raised 4 children, and worked the family farm until retiring in 1982. In a rare interview conducted in 1990, 2 years before his death, Callahan reflected on the operation. "I wasn't trying to be a hero or make history. I was trying to solve a problem with the tools and knowledge I had available. We needed prisoners. We couldn't afford casualties getting them, so I figured out a way to make the Germans come to us instead of us going to them. It wasn't complicated. It was just applying what I had learned growing up on a farm." This humility was typical of Callahan's generation, men who had accomplished extraordinary things but considered themselves ordinary. Yet his achievement was extraordinary, not despite its simplicity, but because of it. Before we conclude this remarkable story, I want to ask you to do something that helps us continue bringing you these incredible historical accounts. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please click that subscribe button now. These stories of courage, ingenuity, and determination deserve to be remembered and shared. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode. The contrast between Callahan's approach and typical German military procedure illustrates a broader truth about military effectiveness. German armed forces were among history's most professional military organizations. They combined excellent training, solid doctrine, good equipment, and experienced leadership. Yet they lost because they could not adapt as effectively as their more flexible opponents. American forces proved more adaptable, more willing to improvise, more comfortable with unconventional solutions. This adaptability stemmed from American culture's emphasis on individual initiative and pragmatic problem solving. In a democracy where authority was questioned and individual rights were valued, soldiers felt empowered to propose solutions that contradicted established procedures. The shovel trap was possible because Private First Class Callahan felt comfortable proposing an unorthodox plan to Lieutenant Harrison, and Harrison felt comfortable approving it, despite its deviation from standard procedures. In the German military, with its stronger emphasis on hierarchy and procedure, such an exchange would have been less likely. This cultural difference, multiplied across thousands of tactical situations throughout the war, contributed significantly to Allied victory. German forces were often tactically superior in individual engagements, but American forces were strategically superior in adapting to changing conditions and innovating solutions to novel problems. Callahan's trap succeeded because it exploited a fundamental aspect of human behavior. German soldiers followed patterns because patterns work most of the time. They used terrain features for cover because terrain features usually provide cover. They trusted their training and experience because training and experience are usually reliable guides. The trap worked because it created a situation where normal patterns led to capture rather than safety. The simplicity of Callahan's trap was its strength. Complex plans have more failure points. Sophisticated operations require more resources. Simple plans, executed with basic tools by small teams, are more robust. They can adapt to changing conditions. They succeed through logic rather than luck. Private First Class James Robert Callahan embodied these qualities. He was not a military genius, he was not a professional soldier, but he could observe enemy behavior, identify patterns, and design a simple solution that exploited those patterns effectively. 43 German soldiers captured in one night without firing a shot. A Silver Star earned with an entrenching tool and common sense. A tactical success achieved through understanding behavior rather than through superior firepower. These accomplishments represent American military culture at its most effective, pragmatic, adaptable, and successful through creativity rather than complexity. American victory was achieved not just through bombers and tanks and artillery, but through the accumulated creativity of millions of individual soldiers who refused to be constrained by what military manuals said was possible. They improvised, they adapted, they overcame. And in doing so, they proved that democracy's supposed weakness, its tolerance for individual initiative, was actually a source of tremendous strength. Jim Callahan went home to Iowa and resumed farming, his moment of fame a brief interruption in a life of quiet productivity. But his achievement echoes through military history as proof that wars are won not just by professionals executing perfect doctrine, but by citizens applying common sense to uncommon situations. The Germans who fell into his trap learned a lesson that the Wehrmacht as an institution never fully absorbed. American soldiers were not inferior warriors. They were different warriors, fighting with different methods, drawing on different strengths, succeeding through different means. The professional German military, for all its excellence, could not adapt quickly enough to this reality. On a frozen December night in 1944, 5 American soldiers armed with entrenching tools and common sense captured 43 German soldiers without firing a shot. This small tactical success, multiplied by thousands of similar improvisations across multiple theaters, contributed to Allied victory. The lesson remains relevant. In warfare, as in life, creativity and adaptability often triumph over professionalism and procedure. Jim Callahan's shovel trap was not sophisticated. It was not elegant, but it worked. It captured enemy soldiers, provided valuable intelligence, boosted American morale, and demonstrated that American ingenuity could defeat German professionalism. The farm boy from Iowa had solved his problem, captured his Germans, and proven that common sense could triumph over military doctrine when applied with creativity and courage.